The poverty you carry is not an accident of fate nor the result of lack of effort. It is a frequency in which your consciousness is imprisoned, transmitting signals that crystallize exactly what you fear most. Bentov spent decades proving something that goes against everything taught about prosperity. The problem is not out there, it's not in the economy, it's not in your education or missed opportunities. The problem lies in the position of the observer you have become, programmed since childhood to collapse the quantum field always in the direction of scarcity. At this exact moment, parallel versions of you are already living the abundance you desire. They are not motivational fantasies, but quantum realities coexisting with this one you are experiencing now. The difference between the life you live and the life you aspire to is not years of hard work or a stroke of luck. It is a shift in vibrational frequency that your own body is blocking through cellular memories recorded by generations of survival. What you will discover here are not superficial positive thinking techniques that you have already tried and failed. It is the real science behind consciousness as a creative force of material reality. Bentov unraveled the invisible mechanisms that keep intelligent, hard-working, and talented people trapped in poverty while others naturally flow toward prosperity. Prepare to dismantle the energetic fortress that you yourself have built around your capacity to receive. Poverty functions like a radio station tuned to a specific frequency. Bentov spent years researching altered states of consciousness and discovered something disturbing. The human brain operates exactly like a quantum receiver-transmitter, capable of capturing and emitting waves that literally shape the material reality around the physical body. This means that each thought carries with it a vibrational signature that propagates through the invisible energetic field that permeates all existence. Here is the central problem that most people face without even realizing it. Deep identification with scarcity transforms the mind into an antenna permanently tuned to the frequency of lack. Each time someone thinks, "I don't have enough money," "I'll never get out of this situation," or "this life is not for me," specific waves are emitted and begin to crystallize exactly what is being transmitted. The morphogenetic field, this ocean of information that connects all things, receives these waves and reflects them back in the form of circumstances, encounters, and opportunities that only confirm the original limitation. The pineal gland plays a crucial role in this process of decoding reality. Bentov demonstrated through his research that this small structure in the center of the brain functions as a translator between the subtle dimensions of consciousness and concrete material experience. It literally filters billions of information per second, deciding what will become conscious and what will remain invisible to individual perception. The filter it uses is programmed by the deepest beliefs, those that were absorbed since childhood, often even before the capacity to question or reflect critically about them. This filter of scarcity operates so subtly that it goes unnoticed by most people. Someone may be surrounded by real opportunities for financial growth, relationships that could open doors, insights that would lead to creative solutions, but the pineal simply does not allow these possibilities to cross the threshold of consciousness. The brain automatically discards everything that does not fit the dominant vibrational pattern of personal identity. Bentov used to say that we live in a universe of infinite abundance, but most can only see through a keyhole, and that keyhole is shaped by the self-image we carry about who we believe we are. The situation becomes even more complex because this process continuously feeds back on itself. The person tuned to the frequency of poverty perceives only evidence of limitation. This evidence reinforces the belief that there really is no way out. This belief further strengthens the transmission of the frequency of scarcity, and the cycle deepens. Bentov called this a negative feedback loop, a closed circuit that self-perpetuates with mathematical precision, becoming increasingly difficult to break as time passes and experiences accumulate as irrefutable proof of a supposed immutable truth about the nature of individual reality. The most fascinating, and at the same time most challenging, aspect of this discovery lies in the fact that change cannot happen only at the level of superficial thought or conscious intentions. Millions of people try to use positive affirmations, visualizations, and motivational techniques, but remain trapped in the same vibrational frequency because the deep program remains untouched, operating in the background of consciousness like an invisible operating system that determines each outcome even before the conscious decision is made. The quantum universe operates under principles that completely defy common sense logic. Bentov dedicated years exploring this frontier between physics and consciousness, reaching conclusions that revolutionize the way we understand the manifestation of material reality. At the subatomic level, all possibilities exist simultaneously in a state of quantum superposition. This means that the version of reality where someone lives in abundance and the version where that same person remains in poverty coexist as equally valid potentials, floating in a field of probabilities until the exact moment when consciousness enters the scene and makes the observation. This act of observing is not passive as it seems at first glance. Consciousness, according to Bentov's discoveries, functions as an active collapsing agent of the quantum wave function. Each time someone directs attention to something, the entire field of infinite possibilities instantly collapses into a single manifest reality. What Bentov called cosmic consciousness represents this inherent capacity of each human being to intentionally choose which potential will be crystallized in three-dimensional experience. Abundance is already present as quantum potential, awaiting only the correct collapse of the wave function to become tangible and experienceable in the physical plane of existence. The central problem arises because this collapse does not happen through the superficial conscious mind that represents only a minimal fraction of total brain activity. Studies demonstrate that approximately 95% of decisions, reactions, and behavioral patterns are controlled by the subconscious, that deep layer of the mind that operates outside the reach of immediate perception. Bentov discovered that this submerged part of consciousness carries extremely ancient programming, some transmitted through entire generations by genetic memory, others recorded during traumatic childhood experiences, and still others silently absorbed from the cultural and social environment in which each person was shaped from birth. These programs function as automatic algorithms that run in the background, making thousands of microdecisions per day without the person perceiving even a fraction of them. Each time an opportunity for prosperity arises in the field of possibilities, the already installed subconscious program quickly checks whether that reality fits the parameters established by the deep identity. If the internal self-image is programmed for limitation, the subconscious automatically collapses the wave function in the direction of scarcity, even if the conscious mind is intensely desiring the opposite. Bentov observed this phenomenon repeatedly in his studies on meditation and altered states. People with genuine conscious intentions of prosperity continued manifesting results of poverty because the root program remained unchanged. This subconscious program was recorded through intense emotional repetition over many years. Children absorb their parents' beliefs about money not through the words they hear, but through the emotions they feel in the home environment. The parent's financial fear creates a vibrational signature that permeates the entire house, and the child registers that frequency as normal or safe simply because it is familiar. Ancestral traumas related to wars, famines, and persecutions are recorded in mitochondrial DNA and are transmitted through generations as a cellular memory of survival. The nervous system inherits these memories and begins to interpret abundance as dangerous, because in the ancestral past, calling attention through prosperity could mean becoming a target of violence or expropriation. Social conditioning adds even more layers to this complex programming. Phrases like, "money doesn't grow on trees," "the rich won't go to heaven," "we have to be content with what we have," and "prosperity brings problems," are repeated thousands of times during personality formation, creating deep neural tracks that automatically direct the collapse of the wave function. Bentov realized that reversing this process requires much more than simply wanting something different or repeating positive affirmations in the morning. The transformation must reach the underground layers of consciousness where the algorithms actually operate, reprogramming the very structure through which the quantum observer interacts with the field of infinite possibilities that awaits only a new command to reorganize itself into completely different configurations. Thoughts are not just abstract neurological events confined to the interior of the skull. Bentov made a revolutionary discovery when studying the energetic patterns that emerge during different mental states. Each thought generates a specific geometric structure in the auric field that surrounds the physical body. Using sensitive equipment capable of detecting subtle electromagnetic variations, he demonstrated that thoughts of different natures produce completely distinct visual signatures. This invisible geometry of thought is not mere scientific curiosity, but the very architecture through which consciousness interacts with the quantum field around it, determining which possibilities can or cannot manifest in tangible experience. Thoughts rooted in scarcity create chaotic, fragmented, and disharmonious patterns in the personal energetic field. Bentov observed through his instruments that these patterns resemble irregular waves, full of destructive interferences, without coherence or clear direction. Each time someone thinks, "I am poor," "I will never have enough," or "I don't deserve abundance," distorted energetic structures begin to form around the body, literally creating an interference field that blocks the natural flow of opportunities. These distortions function as invisible barriers that repel positive synchronicities, favorable encounters, and creative insights that could open doors to prosperity. On the other hand, thoughts aligned with abundance generate perfectly symmetrical and harmonious geometric patterns. Bentov was impressed to observe that mental states of gratitude, appreciation, and recognition of prosperity produce energetic mandalas of extraordinary beauty, structures that resemble sacred flowers, fractals, and patterns found in nature. These coherent geometries create fields of magnetic attraction around the person, functioning as antennas tuned to the frequency of opportunities. The ordered auric field literally resonates with the possibilities of abundance present in the quantum vacuum, establishing a vibrational bridge through which prosperity can flow from potential to concrete manifestation. The question becomes even deeper because these geometric structures do not disappear instantly after the thought passes. Bentov discovered that repetitive mental patterns create increasingly solid and persistent energetic formations in the auric field. Someone who mentally maintains the identity of "I am poor" 4 years ends up building an extremely dense energetic architecture around them, an invisible fortress that becomes progressively more resistant to change. This structure is not built by the universe's punishment, nor by malignant external forces, but by individual consciousness itself tirelessly repeating the same vibrational pattern until it crystallizes into a semi-permanent form in the subtle field. This energetic fortress operates as a shield that automatically repels everything that does not resonate with its dominant frequency. Real opportunities for prosperity may arise in the person's path, but are literally blocked by the invisible architecture before even being consciously perceived. The universe is not denying abundance, as many mistakenly believe. The flow of possibilities continues present and available all the time, but the geometric structure built by repetitive thoughts of scarcity functions as a wall that prevents the entry of these possibilities into the person's experiential field. Bentov compared this to someone who builds walls around their own house and then complains that the sun does not enter through the windows. The transformation of this reality requires much more than simply thinking positive for a few days or repeating affirmations without real emotional conviction. The sacred geometry of thoughts only changes through a genuine shift in vibrational frequency maintained consistently over time. Bentov emphasized that dismantling an energetic fortress built over years or decades requires patience, persistence, and a deep understanding that each thought is literally rebuilding the invisible architecture through which life is experienced. The first step is not to try to force positive thoughts on a foundation of crystallized negativity, but to recognize the structure that has already been built and understand that it is being kept active not by external forces, but by the continuous mental activity itself that daily feeds the same geometric patterns of limitation. The human nervous system possesses capabilities that go far beyond the basic biological functions recognized by conventional science. Bentov dedicated a significant part of his research to demonstrating that the complex network of neurons, nerves, and synapses functions essentially as a sophisticated biological antenna capable of tuning into different frequencies of reality that exist simultaneously in parallel dimensions of spacetime. This revolutionary discovery suggests that the physical body is not just a passive receiver of sensory information from the immediate environment, but an active instrument of navigation through multiple timelines that coexist in the quantum fabric of existence. Bentov's research with experienced meditators revealed something extraordinary. In deep meditative states, the pattern of brain waves changes so radically that the nervous system begins to access information that is not available in the common waking state. This information does not come from the past stored in memory, nor from the logical processing of already known data. It comes from parallel versions of the person themselves, alternative timelines where different decisions were made and distinct realities develop. In some of these parallel versions, abundance is already a consolidated reality, a natural state of existence experienced without effort or struggle, simply as the organic manifestation of a consciousness tuned to the correct frequency. The problem that prevents most people from accessing these prosperous versions of themselves is stored directly in body tissue. Bentov discovered that the body is not just a neutral physical vehicle, but a living archive of cellular memory that records each significant emotional experience lived over the years. Each time someone goes through a situation of deprivation, financial humiliation, or material failure, the nervous system records this experience not only in the brain, but in specific cells distributed throughout the organism. These cellular memories create real physical contractions, chronic muscular tensions, and energetic blockages that keep the body permanently anchored in the vibrational frequency of scarcity. The solar plexus, energetic center located in the upper abdomen region, accumulates tension each time financial fear is experienced. Bentov observed that people with a history of poverty present chronic contractions in this area, as if the body were in permanent state of defense against threats to survival. The throat, region associated with expression and personal power, also develops constriction in individuals who have internalized the belief that they have no voice or value in the world. The heart, deep emotional center, progressively closes itself in layers of protection after repeated experiences of rejection, failure, or disappointment related to money and social status. These physical contractions are not merely abstract psychosomatic symptoms, but real alterations in the biophysical structure of the body that completely modify the way the nervous system processes and transmits information. These bodily memories function as heavy anchors that keep consciousness trapped in a specific timeline. Even if the conscious mind ardently desires to change reality and access the prosperous version of itself that exists in a parallel dimension, the body continues transmitting the signals of poverty through its own physical structure. Bentov compared this to trying to tune into a new radio station while keeping the antenna physically stuck in the old position. The nervous system, functioning as a biological antenna, simply cannot capture the frequencies of abundance because it is structurally configured to resonate only with the vibrations of scarcity recorded in cellular memory. The situation becomes even more complicated because these bodily contractions create a continuous feedback cycle with mental patterns. The tense body sends signals to the brain that something is wrong, that the environment is dangerous, that it is necessary to remain in survival mode. The brain interprets these signals and generates thoughts of worry, scarcity, and limitation. These thoughts, in turn, create more tension in the body, deepening the contractions and strengthening the cellular memories of poverty. Bentov called this a psychosomatic loop, a vicious circle where mind and body keep each other mutually trapped in the same vibrational frequency, making the transition to a different timeline where prosperity is already manifest increasingly difficult. The understanding of this mechanism reveals why so many mental techniques fail to produce lasting changes in people's financial situation. Visualizations, affirmations, and mental reprogramming may temporarily alter thought patterns, but if bodily memories remain intact, the nervous system will continue transmitting the old signals, keeping consciousness anchored in the reality of scarcity. Bentov emphasized that true transformation must include the physical body, releasing the contractions, dissolving the cellular memories, and reconfiguring the biological antenna so that it can finally capture the frequencies of timelines where abundance is not a distant future achievement, but a present state awaiting only the correct tuning to become the experienced reality. Between one thought and another exists a space that most people never consciously perceive. This interval, this almost imperceptible pause where mental activity ceases for a fraction of a second, carries a secret that mystics of ancient traditions knew intuitively and that modern quantum physicists began to prove through complex mathematical equations. Bentov dedicated years studying this apparently simple phenomenon, discovering that the void between thoughts is not an empty and meaningless nothingness, but rather a direct portal to what scientists call the zero-point field, the fundamental substrate of reality where all the energy and matter of the universe have their primordial origin. Eastern mystics called this space sunyata, the luminous void that contains all possibilities before they manifest. Sufis referred to it as the non-being from which all being emerges. Bentov, working at the frontier between science and spirituality, demonstrated that these poetic descriptions corresponded to something measurable by quantum physics. The zero-point field is an infinite ocean of fluctuating energy that permeates all space, including the apparently empty space between subatomic particles. This field contains more energy in 1 cubic centimeter than all the visible matter in the universe. The profound irony is that what seems empty to the physical senses is, in fact, the densest and most powerful source of creative potential that exists. Poverty, in this expanded perspective, reveals itself as a state of disconnection from this infinite field. Bentov observed that people trapped in the frequency of scarcity live entirely identified with the incessant flow of thoughts about lack, worry, and limitation. The mind never stops, always calculating, always fearing, always trying to control an uncertain future through present anxiety. This constant mental activity creates a noise barrier that prevents access to the quantum void between thought. It is like trying to hear soft music in a room full of people shouting. The music is present all the time, but the environmental noise makes it impossible to perceive it. The zero-point field continues offering its infinite possibilities, but consciousness is too busy with mental chatter to establish contact with this source. The process of manifesting abundance does not involve creating something from nothing through willpower or intense positive thinking. Bentov emphasized that this misunderstanding leads millions of people to failure and frustration. Abundance already exists as potential in the zero-point field. All the riches, opportunities, connections, and resources that someone could desire are already present in this quantum ocean of infinite possibilities. The work of consciousness is not to fabricate prosperity through mental effort, but rather to allow the natural flow of this field to manifest through the individual channel that each person represents. The difference is subtle in words, but radical in practical consequences. Poverty, then, is not caused by the absence of abundance in the universe, but by resistance to the natural flow of this infinite field. Bentov compared this to someone standing in a river of crystal-clear water dying of thirst because they refuse to open their mouth. The river is not being denied, the water is not scarce, but the person has created an artificial barrier through psychological resistance. This resistance takes many forms: fear of having and losing, guilt for desiring prosperity, belief of unworthiness, identification with struggle as a form of identity, unconscious need for punishment for past mistakes, religious programming that associates poverty with spiritual virtue. All these forms of resistance create contractions in consciousness that block the channel through which the zero-point field could express itself. The state of abundance, in contrast, is characterized by surrender to this natural flow. Bentov discovered that meditators who reached deep states of mental quietude, where the space between thoughts naturally expanded, began to report extraordinary synchronicities in their lives. Opportunities arose effortlessly, resources appeared at the exact moment of need, solutions to financial problems emerged from unexpected places. These phenomena were not supernatural miracles, but the organic manifestation of the zero-point field operating through a consciousness that had relaxed its defenses and allowed the natural flow of universal intelligence. The key to accessing this infinite field lies in the capacity to inhabit the space between thoughts with increasing frequency and duration. Bentov developed specific techniques to expand these intervals of inner silence, but all of them converged on a central principle: stop trying to control reality through the thinking mind and start trusting the intelligence of the quantum void. This trust is not blind faith or naive optimism, but a recognition based on direct experience that the apparent nothingness between thoughts contains wisdom infinitely superior to limited linear reasoning. The individual mind can calculate some possibilities based on information from the past, but the zero-point field has simultaneous access to all possibilities in all timelines, coordinating synchronicities and manifestations that the mind could never plan or predict with its restricted logic. The personal identity that someone carries is not a fixed and immutable truth, but a temporary perspective adopted by consciousness. Bentov revolutionized the understanding of the nature of the self by demonstrating that what we call person is actually a specific point of view through which universal consciousness is experiencing three-dimensional reality. The poor person observing the world through the lenses of scarcity is not a being condemned to eternal limitation, but a consciousness that is temporarily identified with that particular perspective, in the same way that an actor temporarily identifies with the character they are playing during a theatrical performance. This fundamental distinction between consciousness and personal identity opens revolutionary doors for transformation. Bentov used to ask a devastatingly simple question to his students: who is observing the poor person? If someone can perceive that they are trapped in poverty, if they can recognize limiting thought patterns, if they can identify emotions of scarcity, then obviously there exists a deeper observer who is witnessing all of this. This observer cannot be the limited person itself, because the eye cannot see itself directly. What observes poverty is necessarily beyond poverty, operating from a level of consciousness that transcends the temporal identity with which most people are completely fused. The central problem of abundance manifestation does not lie in the lack of techniques, knowledge, or external opportunities, but in the position of the observer. Bentov demonstrated through experiments with altered states of consciousness that the observer is not fixed in a single position. Consciousness possesses the extraordinary capacity to change its point of observation, to disidentify from a limited perspective and assume a broader vision of reality. Someone can be observing through the eyes of the poor person for years, decades even, believing that this is their true nature, but this positioning is an unconscious choice that can be reversed through conscious perception. The revolution begins the moment someone genuinely recognizes that they are choosing to observe through the lenses of scarcity. This choice is not conscious in most cases. It was made long ago through conditioning, traumas, and programming that became automatic. But the fact that it was unconscious does not mean it is irreversible. Bentov emphasized that the simple act of recognizing I am identified with the perspective of poverty already creates a subtle separation between pure consciousness and limited identity. This recognition does not come from the thinking mind trying to convince itself of something, but from a direct insight, a clear perception that arises from the space of silent witness that observes all mental processes without getting involved with them. The manifestation game changes completely at this moment of recognition. Superficial positive affirmations try to convince the poor person that they are rich, but the deep structure remains intact because the observer continues identified with limitation. Bentov showed that this approach is like trying to change the reflection in the mirror without altering the person who is in front of it. True transformation does not happen by trying to modify the content of observation, but by changing the very position of the observer. It is not about convincing the poor person that they are prosperous, but about recognizing that consciousness is not the poor person, never was, and is only temporarily experiencing this perspective as a form of exploration of multidimensional reality. This shift in the observer's position requires a radical stripping of everything that has been accumulated as identity over the years. Bentov called this psychological death, not in the destructive sense, but as a process of liberation from the false layers of identity built upon pure consciousness. Every belief about who one is, every personal story about past failures, every definition inherited from parents and society, all of this needs to be recognized as temporary construction and not as fundamental truth. The person who has no money is a construction. The person who failed is a construction. The person who does not deserve is a construction. All these identities are perspectives adopted by consciousness, not consciousness itself in its essential nature. What remains after this stripping of false identities is the radical quantum truth. Pure consciousness is the very field of infinite possibilities manifesting in human form. Bentov reached this conclusion through decades of research integrating quantum physics, neuroscience, and Eastern contemplative practices. Individual consciousness is not a small separate spark struggling to survive in a hostile universe, but a focal point through which all cosmic intelligence is expressing itself. This truth is not philosophical or religious, but a scientific description of the nature of reality confirmed by quantum mechanics. The observer and the observed field are aspects of the same indivisible consciousness. Embodying this truth completely dissolves the trap of identification with poverty. Bentov observed that those who managed to establish themselves firmly in this expanded perspective experienced radical transformations in their external circumstances, not because they were using manifestation techniques, but because the very structure through which reality was being observed and collapsed had fundamentally changed. The observer is no longer positioned within the story of limitation trying to escape it, but recognizes that they were always beyond that story, that poverty was a temporary role played by consciousness, and that other roles, other realities, other possibilities are available in the same quantum field that contains everything simultaneously, awaiting only a shift in perspective to become the dominant lived experience. Everything that has been revealed here serves no purpose if it remains only as intellectual information accumulated in the mind. Bentov always emphasized that knowledge without application is just philosophical entertainment. The question that remains now is brutally simple. Are you going to continue being the observer identified with scarcity, or are you willing to make the necessary internal revolution to change position? Look at your life at this moment. Do you recognize the patterns? Can you see how your own consciousness has repeatedly collapsed the quantum field in the direction of limitation? Are you ready to dismantle the energetic architecture that you yourself built around your capacity to prosper? These are not rhetorical questions. They are direct invitations to a radical transformation that only you can initiate. Poverty will continue being your reality as long as you remain hypnotized by the identity of one who does not have. No external technique will work if the observer continues in the same position. Bentov showed the way, but walking is the individual responsibility of each consciousness that desires to free itself. If this content touched something deep in you, subscribe to the channel and activate notifications. What has been shared here is only the beginning of a much broader journey through the nature of consciousness and manifestation of reality. In the next content, we will explore specific practical techniques to reprogram the quantum observer and dissolve the cellular memories that keep you anchored in the frequency of scarcity. Real transformation begins now.